Even though there are 13 games on tonight's slate for daily fantasy baseball, it's still a bit of an odd one because there aren't many high upside pitchers available for tonight. Looking at my strikeout projections for this slate, I have 0 pitchers projected for more than 6.6 strikeouts. And for a 26 pitcher sample, that's pretty odd. Now, there are a couple bullpen games here, which does impact things, but overall, it is a much lower scoring slate of pitcher than we're used to for a 13 game offering. So what does that mean for DFS? Who can we turn to, et cetera, et cetera? We're going to break down all that today by get you ready for tonight's slate across MLB DFS. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a digital media managing editor for FanDuel Research, here to break down tonight's 13-game main slate. We're locked set for 7:05 p.m. Eastern for today. Couple weather notes on this slate. The first one is that there is a good chance of rain in D.C. as the Nationals host the Red Sox. Looks like it might clear out around first pitch, so I bet they do play, but check back on that one later. Things are a bit less concerning in New York for the Mets and the Pirates, but another where you'll want to check back on that later. So New York and DC, the two main trouble points for tonight, but I'd expect both those games will be good to go eventually. We're going to break down my favorite options for tonight, including a couple thoughts in those games in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, et cetera, et cetera. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating. Coming up later on today, our PGA DFS podcast previewing the BMW Championship with myself and Brandon Gadula will be up. It is also Dinger Tuesday. Hit a home run with $5 Dinger Tuesdays on FanDuel Sportsbook. Each Tuesday, all customers will get $5 in bonus bets for every home run hit by both teams when they place a $25 to hit a home run wager on MLB games. And the best part about Dinger Tuesdays is even if your bet loses, FanDuel will pay you $5 for every home run. There is no better place to bet America's pastime than on America's #1 sportsbook. Head over to your FanDuel account or download the FanDuel Sportsbook app to pick your home run hitter. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Max bonus $25. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Arizona. 1-800-NEXT-STEP. Protects Next Step to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Wyoming and Kansas, 1-800-522-4700 or in Kansas, ksgamblinghelp.com. Louisiana is 1-877-770-STOP. In Massachusetts, gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. In Maryland, mdgamblinghelp.org. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY, text HOPE-NY. And in West Virginia, go to 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Pitching preview for this Tuesday main slate. Zach Wheeler checks in with the highest salary on FanDuel. His salary is $10,800, followed by Bailey Ober at 10-3. Yusei Kikuchi taking on Wheeler at 99. We got Jordan Montgomery on his new team at 98 with Jack Flaherty on his new team at 96. Michael Wacha at 94. Bobby Miller at 92 with Lucas Giolito, Nick Pivetta, Kyle Hendricks, and Josiah Gray as the other guys at $8,000 or higher. Now, as mentioned, not a lot of high upside guys on this slate. We do have Zach Wheeler, who's a very good pitcher. We got Yusei Kikuchi, who I like quite a bit. Ober just racked up a bunch of strikeouts against Tigers, stuff like that. But there's really no true runaway stud for tonight, which may mean you don't want to pay 10-8 for your pitcher, given that you're not going to get as much bankable upside as you typically would get. I do think that Wheeler is the top guy on the slate. I don't feel firm in that, though. And I think there are two other guys who rank equally as high as him, maybe even higher once you account for salary. Let's talk about Wheeler first, and we'll talk about those guys later on. He's facing the Jays, so not a great matchup for Wheeler, but it's also not the worst. And Wheeler does tend to pitch pretty well on the road. So I'm fine being on him tonight. Let's start with the road aspect here because it is in Toronto. Wheeler's strikeout rate on the road actually a bit higher than at home this year, which does not mean we bump him up because we'd expect that to regress. We just don't bump him down as much on the road as we do everybody else. Wheeler has not been lights out recently, but he's been solid. He has 6 straight starts, getting the quality start bonus on FanDuel. He had 11 strikeouts in one game, 8 in another, and both those starts did come on the road. Overall this season, Wheeler has a 27% strikeout rate. His walk rate is just 4%. He's got his typically good batted ball data, so it isn't the superstar-laden slate, but Wheeler is the closest guy to that. So I'm fine ranking him first. Again, maybe not after considering his salary, but he's number 1 for me tonight, and he is my top 3 after considering his salary. So top 3 regardless, but maybe not number 1 after considering his salary. That's in part because I like his opponent a lot. His opponent is Yusei Kikuchi. We talked about him last week. He's going to be number 2 for me for tonight at $9,900. And in that game, we talked about Kikuchi last week, 7 innings, 1 earned run allowed, and the sample on him being a good pitcher keeps on expanding. We have 13 starts now at Kikuchi, throwing fewer changeups, and that's a pretty big sample. His ERA in that time is 2.79. Now, ERA is not sticky across 13 starts, but the larger that sample becomes, the harder it becomes to deny that Kikuchi's improvement is legit. And it's backed up by his peripherals too, because in that time, Kikuchi has a 3.77 skill interactive ERA. His strikeout rate is 27%. And the key thing for him is that his hard hit rate is down to 36%. So I don't think the ERA where it is sustainable, but I think that him being much improved is very much sustainable. He's facing the Phillies here. They have a 113 and WRC plus against righties with a 203 ISO, really good numbers against lefties, and they could get to him. And that's why, before considering salary, I prefer Wheeler. But the Phillies do strike out a bit. So Kikuchi has upside, and I think it's worth digging into him on a thin slate. As far as strikeout projections for this one, I've got Kikuchi at 6.44 and Wheeler at 6.63. So you're not losing a whole lot in dipping down to Kikuchi. After considering his salary, I'd probably go Kikuchi over Wheeler for tonight. As far as the value play here, it's another guy who's right in the same strikeout projection range as Kikuchi and Zach Wheeler, so maybe this is actually a good slate to spend down and save some salary. That guy is Nick Pivetta, whose salary is $8,500 for tonight. As mentioned, check back on the weather out in DC first, but if the weather does clear, I like Pivetta a lot. He's facing the Nationals, and they're a team we've talked a lot about recently because they're a low strikeout team, which is annoying for opposing pitchers, but everything else lines up very well. They have an 86 WRC plus against righties with a 131 ISO, and that makes him a good mesh for Pivetta because he does let up too much hard contact and too many fly balls, but the Nationals don't supply those. The strikeouts for Pivetta definitely have been there. Across the full season, Pivetta has a 30% strikeout rate. Now, the caveat is that some of that has come in relief, and you typically see strikeout rates increase in relief. But if we narrow the sample to just Pivetta, since his pitch count has expanded, he actually is even better than that. His pitch count got back above 75 on July 7th. And from that day on, his strikeout rate is 37%. It has been 38% in both of the 2 full starts he has made. So Pivetta is dealing. He was overdue to return to this rotation. He had earned this spot back, and he's getting a pretty full leash because in those 2 starts, pitch counts for Pivetta have been 104 and 90. I have Pivetta projected for 95 tonight, and that gets his strikeout projection up to 6.4. And again, that's actually just a hair below both Kikuchi and Wheeler. I want to stack some high salary teams in the Braves and the Diamondbacks tonight, so I actually think there is incentive to spend down on Pivetta at $8,500 and allow myself to get to those stacks. So I would say Pivetta is more enticing to me than most value plays. And I think that on this slate, he grades out really well, even before you account for his low salary. So I would not be shocked if Nick Pivetta does wind up being the pitcher I wind up using tonight, given the teams that I want to stack. So Nick Pivetta, to me, a mighty fine value play in DFS at $8,500. So again, top 3 pitchers, however you want to rank them. Wheeler 1, Kikuchi 2, Pivetta 3, but I'm probably leaning between Pivetta and Kikuchi as being the pitchers I use most for today. Speaking of stacks, I mentioned that I do want to save some salary to potentially get to some stacks, and it goes across all 3, not just the Diamondbacks and the Braves, but also the Cardinals who are in the discussion here. Let's start things off with Arizona back at Coors Field once again. Didn't fully come through last night, but they were fine. facing Ty Block here, and Block has had good results as a starter, but those results to me don't seem sustainable. Arizona, once again, the top stack as a result. Block has made 4 starts this year. His ERA is 2.41. It's very good. He's let up multiple runs just once, and even that wasn't a huge blow up. And that does include shutting down the Dodgers last time out. That one specifically was Block's most impressive start as of yet, because the other ones were pretty easy matchups. But the underlying number is still skeptical of Block. Across those 4 starts, he has a 5.50 skill interactive ERA. His strikeout rate is 11%. Now, you would understand good results if Block had great batted ball data, but his hard hit rate is 45%. So it's not the batted ball data. I think it's possibly just getting lucky. It's not a bad matchup for him because Arizona, much better against righties and lefties. Their WRC plus against lefties is 97, but they're going to put the ball in the air a ton, and that's enough for me to stack them to see if Block does wind up progressing for tonight. So I like Arizona quite a bit and will be on them for stacking, despite the fact they were just middling last night. Now, a couple big additions for Arizona here as they are facing lefties. The big first one is Tommy Pham, got him close to the deadline. Pham, a 267 against 267 ISO against lefties so far this year. That gives them 2 batters with an ISO above 200 against lefties, with Christian Walker being the other. So they needed Tommy Pham pretty badly, and we needed him for DFS because we need another bat in there who can make hard contact. So Pham is one addition. Other one is Kyle Lewis, who just came back last night, and he hit 5th against a righty. That to me says there is a very good chance that Lewis is batting at an important part of the order for tonight for the Diamondbacks. His salary is $2,500. You look at his AAA numbers, Lewis had a 55% hard hit rate down there. We've seen him have really good numbers in the big leagues in the past. It's been a bit now, but primarily the reason Lewis hasn't broken out, I think, is injuries. So you got him healthy right now. He's a guy who can definitely hit for power, puts the ball in the air enough. So I would say between Tommy Pham and Kyle Lewis, big enough additions to this lineup for us to feel better about the Cardinals against lefties than we did in the past. Cardinals are going to be number 2 going up against Freddie Tarnok. I think they've not officially announced if Tarnok will be the starter here for the A's, may use an opener in front of him. Regardless, check back on the starter later, but I think it will be Tarnok as at least the bulk guy for the A's. And I don't have a firm grasp on him yet. He's still just 14 2/3 innings in the majors. Even in AAA, it was just 19 2/3 innings before he debuted. But I do think we'll get a healthy number of base runners in this game from the Cardinals. The one thing we do know about Tarnok is he's going to walk a lot of guys because he had a 14% walk rate in the minors and it's 17% in the majors. And added on top of that walk rate is that he is a big fly ball pitcher with just a 25% ground ball rate so far. When you have a lot of walks and let up a lot of fly balls, that's a pretty good recipe to get a multi-run inning and like a 3-run home run. Looking back to last year, Tarnok did let up fly balls there. Control's a bit better for him. He got more strikeouts, but that was in AAA. You look at projection systems like Zips from Dan Szymborski, the bat from Derek Carty, they all are still pretty low on him. They don't view him as being a shutdown guy in the majors. So that's where the peripherals lead me as well in a small sample. The Cardinals, 115 WRC plus against righties. So I think we can feel good about them in this spot. I think we should stack the Cardinals for tonight. One shift I want to make with the Cardinals is making sure that I view Lars Nootbaar as being a legit like stud for DFS. Like when you're talking about prioritizations on this team, typically you're talking Arenado and Goldschmidt right away. I think Nootbaar is at least in that discussion in the same tier as those guys. Against righties this year, Nootbaar has a 206 ISO with 8 stolen bases. His ISO is actually above Paul Goldschmidt's against righties, and he's tied with Goldschmidt in steals across 100 fewer plate appearances. And the power numbers from Nootbaar since the All-Star break specifically are disgusting. So I don't think we view him as being in the same tier as those two guys, but I think we should. I think the Lars Nootbaar is right there with Arenado and Goldschmidt in the top tier among Cardinals prioritizations, and I really want to be on him for tonight. Again, pending who the A's decide to throw out there as their starter. Mentioned before, I like the Braves tonight. They're facing Luis Severino. Severino clearly still trying to figure things out. He may because there is a good pitcher somewhere in there for Severino, but he's not there yet. And this offense is absurd, as we saw last night. So back on them once again, personally. Most recently, Severino has been starting to mix in a cutter. It's across his past 6 outings, and as you're aware, it has not fixed things. His skill interactive ERA is 4.81, 18% strikeout rate with a 46% hard hit rate. So he probably has a reason for trying to throw this cutter, but his numbers are actually worse using the cutter than they were before. So I'd assume he'll abandon it eventually, this approach, but even if he does, I don't think it'll fix things. It might, but I'm just gonna I want to see it before I stop stacking against him. That's especially true with an offense as good as the Braves. So the Braves, to me, a nice stack yet again for tonight. Now, talking about Ozzie Albies in yesterday's show, saying hope he played because he was a lefty facing off against Schmidt, who struggled against lefties. Albies didn't play there, and now sounds like he'll go on the IL. What's interesting is that they moved Michael Harris up in the order to bat second. And that should be a pretty big shift in the way of view because he was batting ninth before. And not only is the volume projection for Harris much better, batting second versus ninth, but also he's surrounded by much better batters. That gives him more chances for runs scored and RBIs. So we should bump Michael Harris way up, given that he's going to bat second now, most likely, with always being on the IL. Harris has been very good recently. He's got 2 sources of upside, and I made him my dinger pick last night. Might run it back and do it once again. A little spoiler alert there. But I think that Harris, moving up in the order, should shift away from him. I was okay with him batting ninth personally, but especially if he's going to bat second, he is a superstar here at $3,200 within this lineup. Things to watch for tonight. Other value play with upside in the slate, other than Pivetta, is Touki Toussaint. His salary is $7,000 flat, so very, very low. He has 9 strikeouts in consecutive games. Now, the White Sox letting get a full leash, and Toussaint is taking full advantage. I do think he'll regress. I actually took the under on his strikeout prop on covering the spread today. But for $7,000, you should at least give him some thought because there is definitely a path to upside there, as he has shown. Diamondbacks throwing a bullpen game today against the Rockies. Their bullpen, I would say, at least solid. It's definitely not one we need to actively target, but also it means that the Rockies are facing middle relievers the entire game. So I find with the Rockies, not my top 3 for tonight, but if you want some one-offs there, totally fine with that, personally. Finally, the Mariners are facing Jordan Lyles tonight, and Lyles has been a punching bag all season long, but he's been much better, doing a much better job of suppressing hard contact recently. His hard hit rate allowed is 33% across 11 starts with fewer curveballs. And the results are not great still, but it's better than it was before, at least. The Mariners offense not lighting the world on fire right now, so I do think it's wise to be a bit lower on them than we otherwise would have if you just put them against Lyles like last week, a couple weeks ago, whatever it may be. Bump them down a bit as a result of his improvements. Let's finish up here with some dinger calls for Dinger Tuesday over at FanDuel Sportsbook. I don't want to go boring and fun today because that is boring. It's Dinger Tuesday. So in the spirit of Dinger Tuesday, I'm going to run it back to Michael Harris. His home run odds at FanDuel Sportsbook were plus 560 earlier on. I'd assume they're probably still around there. And again, moving them up to second in the order does make a pretty significant difference. And I want to account for that. And I want to be high on Harris, whether it is in DFS or from a betting perspective with home run props. I think we should be on him for the very short-term future. So Michael Harris plus 560, my Dinger Tuesday recommendation here on the show. Other one is actually not posted yet because, again, the A's have not announced their starter yet, but I want to go Lars Nootbaar because, again, been getting much better recently, showing more power since the All-Star break, batting at the top of the order. I think it's pretty good weather for hitting for tonight in St. Louis as well. At 75 degrees, not quite as good as usual, but I like Nootbaar regardless. So once the odds are up at FanDuel for the A's and the Cardinals, check out where Nootbaar is. If he's 5-1 or longer, that's where I'd probably dive in. 16.7% implied odds. I think that's about appropriate for him. So Lars Nootbaar and Michael Harris, the dinger calls for this Dinger Tuesday. That's all we got here for today on the Solo Shot. As mentioned, we are back later on today talking about the BMW Championship right here in Illinois coming up later on today. Find that on the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed with myself and Brandon Gadula. You can find the Solo Shot both there and over on the FanDuel YouTube page and on FanDuel TV Plus on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku devices. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. Good luck to all you tonight. Enjoy the baseball. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down Wednesday's slate. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.